Hey, shalom, shalom. All praises, honor, and glory belong to Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, Bashem Makakodash. Double honors unto the elders and to the apostles of Great Stone, and salutations to the all for the elect, all right, the men that are pushing this word out in truth and in sincerity. This is the brother Yakal coming at you with another lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai. All right, it's going to be a quick one, you know. Just inspires. The lesson was inspired by a video I saw the Apostle Tahar did and was reacting to, where the IUIC in cahoots, right, praying together, you know, with the Christians, right, um, and the scriptures say, actually, I have it up. The scriptures say, 1 Corinthians 14 and verse 33 says, "For the Most High is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all churches of the saints." All right. It says that the Most High is not the author of confusion, but of peace. So the Most High is about order. All right. Is about structure. You know. For a matter of fact, the scripture says, "What, let all things be done um, in decency and in order." Let me get it. Uh, right. Yeah. 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse 4, it says, "Let all things be done in decency and in order." All right. So the Most High is not the author of confusion. You know, actually, it was the same chapter. So in no point in time does the Most High orchestrate anything, to be confusing, or to have mixed doctrine or mixed review. All right, where one section believe one thing, say one thing, and do one thing, and another, the complete opposite. All right, or something contrary to that. Everything about the Most High is about what? Structure. It's about order. So there's no point in um sitting down, praying together, you know, with them that don't believe, because really and truly that's what it is. They don't believe, you know. If you're not preaching Yahweh, Ba'asham Yahushai, all right, if you're not teaching, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, hey, guess what? You don't believe, you know. So at no point, there's value in um, you sitting down and being in cahoots, praying together with who? The unbelievers. All right. For a matter of fact, the scripture tell you that in Jeremiah, hey, pray not for them, you know, because you calling on one name, all right, and they calling on another, you know, and then your doctrine and their doctrine aren't the same, because you teach the Israelites, never mind, the both of you call on Jesus, but your doctrines don't align, because you teaching that salvation is to Israel, all right, and we, the so-called blacks, Latinos, and natives, are the true Israelites, but they're teaching what? That there's only spiritual Israel, all right, and salvation is for everyone, so that doesn't align, all right. This is Sirach chapter 13 and verse 1. It says, "He that toucheth pitch shall be defiled therewith, and he that had fellowship with a proud man shall be like unto him." So there's no way that you can put your hand to pitch, all right, or what we call tar, all right, and not be likened onto it, and don't become and not be defiled, sorry, and don't get yourself dirty. You know, the same way the company that you keep, you know, tells who you is, and eventually what you start picking up certain traits, certain mannerisms, all right, of the people that you are around with. You know, like the saying in the world goes, you are the compilation of the five persons that you spend the most time with, you know, roughly quoted. All right. So he that had fellowship with a proud man shall be like unto him. You know, you start thinking like him because you gonna, especially if it's an influential person, you know. It says, burden not thyself above thy power while thou livest, and have no fellowship with one that is mightier and richer than thyself. For how agree the kettle and the earthen pot together? For if the one be smitten against the other, it shall be broken. All right, it says what? For how agree the kettle and the earthen pot together? You know, because what they're not of the same class. They're not in agreement. All right. It says the rich man had done wrong, and yet threatened with all, and the poor is wrong, and he must entreat also. All right. And this really going into what? To Esau. All right. Is going into Esau because he's the rich man, you know? He's the rich man that hey, he do whatever he please. And guess what? You gotta actually let me read it back. Verse 3 says, the rich man had done wrong, and yet he threatened with all. The poor is wrong, and he must entreat also. You know, so Esau, being the rich man, you know, when he done wrong, hey, he still got the proud look about him, you know, the arty spirit about him, all right? That can't touch me spirit, you know. But when the poor is wronged, all right, and we have been wronged, we are the poor, you know, we gotta entreat, we gotta beg for forgiveness. We gotta humble ourselves, even though, you know, we haven't done anything wrong. All right. But the point is that look, there's no agreement, you know, of a mighty and the rich. All right. And the kettle and the earthen pot. All right. This is actually is a Sirach 37. All right. Verse 12 it says, but be continually with a godly man whom thou knowest to keep the commandments of the Lord, whose mind is according to thy mind, and will sorrow with thee if thou shalt miscarry. You know, so be continually with what? A godly man. All right, a man that is likened unto you, your brethren, you know, that they're gonna keep that you know to keep the commandments of the Most High. Hey, these Christians don't teach no commandment. All right, they don't believe in that. They talk about the Ten Commandments, and guess what? Even those they break. All right, even those they break. You know, so there's no fellowship with these Christians, you know, and the Israelites, you know, which at the end of the day, you know, all right, um, IUIC, these men have sold out, you know, and they're going after the bag. That's why they push that name Jesus so heavily, all right, or I should say, that's why they don't push the name Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, even though they know it, even though they once taught it, you know, and they probably, you know, in the quiet time at home, you know, call upon that name. All right. But out in the open, hey, they're not manifesting that name. You know, actually, let me get this. This is uh let me see. Matthew 5. All right, Matthew chapter 5 and verse it's Matthew 5 and verse 15. It says, neither do men light a candle and put it on a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. All right. So hey, when you receive this true doctrine, you become the light of this world. All right. And guess what you got to do? You got to preach it out there in the open. The scripture say what? That whatever is told to you in secret, that ye shall, preach on the outside. All right. These men are preaching the name of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai boldly, you know. So even if they call upon their name, in secret, or behind closed doors, guess what? They're still not doing, what the scriptures say. All right. The scriptures say what? You gotta publish it. All right. 16, it says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. And how they gonna glorify the Father? By knowing His name. All right. And a part of that good works is what? Publishing this name, preaching this name, pushing the vibration of that name upon the face of the earth. You see? So jumping back to Sirach 37 and verse 12. Well, actually that was it. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 14. It says, be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship at righteousness with unrighteousness? Exactly. All right. There's no fellowship with righteousness and unrighteousness. Because at the end of the day, these Christians, teach and believe that come as thou art spirit. That spirit of, hey, I could be the most wicked, unrighteous demon 6 days out of the week. And as long as I show up at church with $2 in my pocket, all right, and I put it to the offering basket, all right, I'm good. I'm in the clear. That's the spirit that's upon these whorehouses, as the scripture call them. It says, on what communion add light with darkness, So there's no communion with light and darkness. All right, the two can't mix. The two don't mesh. You see? So, hey, Lord's willing, this quick one was edifying, giving our praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Kodash, and double honors unto the elders and to the apostles of greatness tone once again, and salutations to you guys out there pushing this part out in truth and in sincerity. Shalom.